single father was fired while holding his sleeping daughter, but a millionaire saw everything and... The afternoon wind swept through the bustling downtown streets, but Daniel Carter hardly noticed. In his arms lay Emily, his 4-year-old daughter, fast asleep with her head resting against his shoulder, her soft curls falling gently over her cheek. He walked slowly, aimlessly, as though moving forward was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. The cardboard box at his feet held everything left from 2 years of hard work: a small cactus, some family photos, an unfinished architectural model, and a few framed certificates. All of it now seemed meaningless. He had been fired. No warning, no personal reason, just another round of layoffs during tough times. But losing the job wasn't the worst part. The hardest part was figuring out how to tell the sleeping girl in his arms that her father wouldn't be going back to work tomorrow. "Excuse me, are you okay?" A calm but clear voice spoke beside him. Daniel looked up, snapping out of his heavy thoughts. In front of him stood a beautiful woman in her 30s, wearing a sleek beige suit next to a black luxury car. I'm fine," Daniel muttered, adjusting Emily as she stirred slightly in his arms, but stayed asleep. "You don't look fine," the woman said, stepping out from behind her car. Her gaze held genuine concern, something Daniel hadn't seen in a long time. He was about to nod and walk away, but instead he surprised himself by saying, "I just got fired." Silence stretched for a second before he added bitterly, "Now I have to figure out how to tell my daughter I can't pay for preschool anymore." The woman tilted her head, her eyes landing gently on Emily. "Your daughter?" "Yeah, Emily. She fell asleep waiting for me at daycare. I think she sensed something was wrong." The woman was quiet for a moment. Then, suddenly, she asked, "Are you married?" Daniel shook his head. "My wife died 2 years ago. Car accident." He wasn't sure why he was telling this stranger, but there was something about her that made it easy to open up. "Just you and her?" she asked softly. "Just the two of us." She studied him for a moment, as if weighing a decision. Then she reached out her hand. "I'm Grace Whitmore." Daniel took it, wary. "Daniel Carter." A faint smile crossed her lips. "I think I have a proposition for you." Daniel frowned. What kind of proposition? She took a deep breath, clearly wondering herself if she was crazy, and said, "Marry me." Daniel nearly dropped Emily. "Excuse me?" "I need a husband. You need stability for your daughter. We could help each other." Daniel took a step back, alarmed. "You don't know me. I don't know you. You're proposing to a complete stranger on the street?" "It sounds insane," Grace nodded. "But hear me out. I run Whitmore Textiles. I have money, more than I could ever spend. But my family won't stop pressuring me to get married. I don't want love. I just want peace. I need a marriage, not romance." Daniel looked at her, half ready to walk away, half intrigued by her strange calm. "And what do I get out of this crazy marriage?" "Your daughter will have everything: private school, medical care, a safe home, and I—" Her voice wavered slightly as she looked at Emily. "I can't have children, but I've always dreamed of being a mother. Maybe I could be a mother to your daughter." Daniel looked down at Emily, then back at Grace. Every part of him screamed that this was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. But somewhere deep down, he also knew. Maybe this was the only door opening when all others had closed. Daniel still felt disoriented as he returned home that evening. He gently laid Emily in her bed, pulled the blanket over her, and sat beside her in silence, watching her peaceful face under the soft night light. She had no idea her father was living through one of the worst days of his life. But what kept Daniel up that night wasn't just the layoff. It was the utterly bizarre and surreal proposal from Grace Whitmore, a woman he'd met only minutes before on the street. He took out the business card from his pocket again, reading the sharp embossed letters. Grace Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Textiles. And on the back, her personal number. He stared at it until the sky turned pale. The next morning, Lily, Daniel's younger sister, dropped by. She immediately noticed something was off in his expression. "You look like you didn't sleep a wink. What's going on?" Daniel told her everything, from being fired to the unbelievable conversation with Grace. Lily's eyes widened. "You mean some rich stranger in a luxury car just pulled over and said, 'Marry me'? That woman needs help." "I thought so too," Daniel sighed. "But she was serious. She said she needs a husband to keep her family off her back, and I need stability for Emily. She promised to cover everything: school, housing, insurance, everything." Lily looked at him, staying quiet for a long moment. "Do you think Carmen would have wanted you to stay alone forever?" That question hit Daniel harder than he expected. He'd never thought of it that way. Carmen once said, "If I'm ever gone, all I want is for you and Emily to be happy." Daniel picked up his phone. His hand trembled as he dialed. Grace answered on the second ring. "So, you're calling?" Her voice was just as calm as the day before. "We need to talk." "Coffee 10 a.m. tomorrow, Mayfield Cafe. It's quiet. I'll bring the contract." The next day, Daniel walked into the cafe with a storm of feelings: nervous, unsure, skeptical, and oddly curious. Grace was already there, a laptop open in front of her, and a neat folder resting beside a cup of tea. "Good morning," she smiled. "You're really serious about this?" Daniel asked directly. "Completely," Grace nodded. "I've drafted a 5-year civil marriage agreement. We live together as a married couple in public, but privately we maintain separate lives. No emotional ties. I'll take care of all financial responsibilities. And in return, I get the image of a family, so my own can finally leave me alone." "And my daughter?" "She'll be loved and cared for like my own," Grace replied without hesitation. "I can't have children, Daniel, but I've always dreamed of being a mother. If I can offer Emily warmth and support, I'm willing to give everything I have." Daniel didn't respond right away. In his mind, he saw Emily's little face asking him the night before, "Daddy, when will I have a mommy like my friends?" He looked up. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll read the contract." Grace nodded. "I don't expect an answer today. Just think it through, because if we start this, there's no turning back." "For Emily," Daniel said softly. "If I do this, it's for her." Grace smiled, not her CEO smile, but something gentler. "And maybe it'll be for you too." And for the first time in months, Daniel allowed himself to hope, not for a job, but for something far more fragile. Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table, the marriage contract laid out in front of him. Every page was meticulously drafted: clauses about finances, privacy, a 5-year term, and a clean termination process. Everything was legal, precise, without loopholes. He had read it 3 times. Nothing changed, except now, it no longer felt like a crazy idea. It was real, tangible, and full of consequences. In the next room, Emily played with her wooden blocks. She hummed softly, her innocent voice stirring something deep in Daniel's chest. He remembered her excited little face when she asked if she was getting a new mommy, even if she didn't quite understand what that meant. This morning, he had called Grace. He had only said one sentence: "Let's do it." And just like that, the wheels were set in motion. 3 weeks later, they stood inside a small office belonging to a local civil officer. All paperwork was done. Only one thing remained: signing. Grace wore a simple cream dress, elegant without being showy. Daniel had chosen a modest gray suit. Emily, proudly dressed in her pale pink princess dress, beamed with joy. Lily, Daniel's sister, stood as his witness. Patricia, Grace's loyal assistant, served as hers. When it came time to sign, Daniel hesitated for just a moment. Grace looked at him. "There's still time to back out if you want." He turned to see Emily swinging her legs on the chair, watching him with big, trusting eyes. Just that one look told him there was no turning back. He signed. Grace followed. The wedding was over in 10 minutes. No flowers, no cake, no romantic vows. Just a contract, stamped, signed, and sealed with a standard "good luck" from the officiant. "You're now officially husband and wife," the man said. "You may kiss the bride." Daniel and Grace glanced at each other, visibly awkward. After a brief pause, he leaned in and kissed her cheek. Emily clapped her hands like she was watching a show. Outside, Emily tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Is Mama Grace really my mom now?" Daniel knelt beside her. "Mama Grace is going to live with us and take care of you, sweetheart, but you still have your mommy in heaven, remember?" Emily thought for a moment, then asked, "Can I call her Mama Grace?" Grace froze, caught off guard. "If you want to, I'd love that," she said softly, her voice slightly trembling. That afternoon, they moved into the new house Grace had arranged in advance, a cozy 2-story home in a quiet suburb, complete with a front lawn, backyard, and 3 bedrooms. Daniel walked in with a small suitcase. He felt like an outsider, stepping into a world too perfect to belong to. "Your room is here," Grace said, pointing to a separate upstairs bedroom. "I figured you'd want your own space." "Thank you," he nodded, quietly surprised by her thoughtfulness. "Emily's room is next to yours. I thought that'd be easier at night, just in case she needs anything." Daniel stepped into his daughter's room. Everything was ready: a tiny bed with pastel sheets, a bookshelf, stuffed animals, and a pink wall with hand-painted butterflies. He turned to Grace and asked quietly, "When did you put all this together?" She smiled. "Last week. I wanted her to feel at home." And for the first time since Carmen passed away, Daniel felt that something in this house felt like family. The first week in the new house passed in strange silence, not tension, just caution. Daniel woke up early each morning to prepare breakfast for Emily. He wasn't sure if Grace wanted to join them, so he kept it simple: eggs, toast, and a small glass of milk for his daughter. Grace left the house early, often before father and daughter even finished breakfast. She didn't say much, just offered a polite nod to Daniel and an occasional smile to Emily, then disappeared into the black car waiting outside. In the evenings, Daniel bathed Emily, read her bedtime stories, and tucked her in by 8 p.m. Then he sat alone in the living room, laptop open, sending out resumes to every architectural firm he could find. Most of the replies were disappointing. Grace returned late, often after both he and Emily had gone to bed. He knew because in the morning her purse would be on the kitchen table, or her high heels would be neatly placed near the door. They lived like strangers under the same roof. On Friday night, while Daniel was slicing fruit after dinner, Emily looked up at him. "Daddy, why doesn't Mama Grace eat dinner with us?" Daniel paused. She's busy with work, sweetheart." "She doesn't like me?" The question stung. "No, honey, it's not that. She just needs time." Emily was quiet for a moment. "I like her. She's gentle, and I like her hair." Daniel leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I know. I think she's kind too, but everyone needs time to get used to new things." That night, when Grace came home and saw Emily already asleep, she paused at the little girl's bedroom door. She didn't enter, didn't speak. She just stood there quietly, watching Emily clutch her teddy bear tightly, then turned and walked away. Daniel, watching from the living room, saw everything. And for the first time, he wondered, was she feeling just as out of place as he was? On Tuesday morning, Daniel woke up early as usual to prepare breakfast, but something felt off. The house was unusually quiet. No Emily singing in her room, no tiny footsteps echoing down the hall. He opened her bedroom door and found her curled up under the blanket, cheeks flushed, eyes dull and tired. "Daddy, my tummy hurts." Daniel's heart sank. He rushed to her side and placed his hand on her forehead, burning hot. Emily had a high fever. He scrambled through drawers, searching for a thermometer, fever medicine, but everything he had was gone, left behind at the old apartment. Panic started to rise. No new insurance, no pediatrician in this area, no idea which hospital to trust. And he didn't know if Grace's insurance could be used. Just then, footsteps came from the stairs. Grace, already dressed for work, paused at the hallway, her eyes immediately registering the panic in Daniel's face. "What happened?" "Emily has a fever," he said quickly. I don't know what to do. Where to take her?" Grace didn't hesitate. She walked straight into Emily's room, sat gently on the edge of the bed, and placed her hand on the girl's forehead. "Hey, sweetheart, not feeling well?" Emily nodded weakly. Grace pulled out her phone. "I'll call Dr. Ramirez. He's the best pediatrician in the city. He's been with my family for years." Less than 30 minutes later, the doctor arrived at their home. Diagnosis: viral fever. Not dangerous, but required rest, fluids, and care. Grace canceled her entire day's schedule. Daniel stood frozen as she changed out of her office clothes, stepped into the kitchen, and started making chicken soup using her grandmother's recipe. She sat next to Emily, read stories, tied her hair using a tutorial from YouTube. For the first time, Daniel didn't see a corporate powerhouse. He saw a woman, warm, nurturing, patient. He sat down beside her, reading aloud with her. Emily smiled weakly and reached out to hold both their hands. "I like it when you're both here," she whispered. Daniel and Grace looked at each other. For the first time, they weren't strangers. It wasn't about contracts. It wasn't about convenience. It was just the three of them, a family, being present. That night, Emily was feeling better. After tucking her in, Daniel stepped onto the balcony, where Grace was sipping tea under the stars. "Thank you," he said softly, "for today." Grace didn't turn around, just smiled. "She's a special little girl. You didn't have to stay all day." "But I wanted to." A gentle silence settled between them. No contracts, no negotiations, just quiet gratitude. And something else growing in the space between their hearts, still unnamed. Ever since the day Emily got sick, things had started to shift. Grace no longer left the house early every morning. She began lingering in the kitchen with Daniel, sharing a quick cup of coffee. Sometimes only 10 minutes, but it was enough to change the rhythm of the once quiet house. The fridge now held more than just milk and butter. It had Emily's favorite cereal, Daniel's strawberry jam, and even a box of Grace's midnight waffle cookies. One morning, Daniel noticed that Grace had learned to tie Emily's pigtails, exactly the way she liked them. When he asked how, she simply smiled and said, "I looked it up on YouTube." Dinner began to include another adult at the table. Gradually, Grace's presence no longer felt like an arrangement. It became a part of the home. One Saturday evening, the three of them sat around the table eating spaghetti. Emily was excitedly talking about her school project, her eyes lit up with joy. Suddenly, she looked at Grace and asked, "Mama Grace, do you want to be an architect like Daddy?" Grace chuckled. "No, sweetie, I like running the company. I like making big decisions." "Do you want to have more babies?" Daniel nearly choked on his water. Grace paused, then gave a soft, sad smile. "Well, I love taking care of you, Emily, but I can't have babies of my own." Emily frowned in thought, then jumped off her chair and hugged Grace tightly. "Then I'll be your special baby forever." Grace wrapped her arms around the little girl, speechless. Daniel sat quietly. In that moment, something shifted inside him. It wasn't just gratitude or responsibility anymore. It was something deeper, something gentler. That night, after Emily was asleep, Daniel was rinsing dishes when Grace walked into the kitchen, rolled up her sleeves, and stood beside him. "Let me help." "I've got it." "I know, but I like doing it." They stood side by side at the sink, saying little. Just simple movements, one washed, one dried, yet it felt oddly intimate. Daniel looked over. "Grace, do you regret it?" She paused. "Regret what?" "This. The marriage?" She was quiet for a beat, then slowly shook her head. "Not once." "Me neither," Daniel said. "It's just, sometimes I forget it's supposed to be pretend. It feels real." Grace gave a small smile. "Maybe that's a good thing. If it feels real to Emily, then it's worth it." Daniel nodded, but deep down he knew. It wasn't just real to Emily anymore. It was starting to feel real for them too. 2 months after the wedding, Grace brought up an unexpected idea one Sunday morning. "Do you have plans for this weekend?" she asked while pouring coffee for both of them. Daniel looked up, surprised. "Not really? Why?" "I have a small place in Vermont. I barely ever use it, but there's a lake, a garden, clean air. I thought we could take a little trip." "All of us?" Daniel asked, and before Grace could answer, Emily ran in shouting, "A trip? Is there a pool?" Grace laughed. "There's a lake, and even horses at the farm next door." "Please, Daddy, please." Emily danced in place, excited. Daniel looked at Grace. In her eyes he saw something new. No calculation, no guarded walls, just quiet hope. "All right," he said, "but I'm driving." "Deal." The trip to Vermont felt like stepping into another life. The cottage was surrounded by trees, with a wooden porch and a hammock strung between 2 big oaks. Emily ran around like she'd been set free. Daniel and Grace, for the first time, truly relaxed. They walked around the lake. Grace taught Emily how to float. Daniel grilled in the backyard. At night, they sat wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching stars in comfortable silence. "Daddy, can we live here forever?" Emily asked on the second night. "This isn't our home, sweetheart," Daniel replied gently. Grace murmured, "But maybe it could be." Daniel turned to her, but she was looking up at the sky, her cheeks slightly pink. That night, after Emily was asleep, Daniel and Grace remained on the porch, each with a glass of wine in hand. "Thanks for this," Daniel said. "It's been a long time since I've seen Emily this happy." "Me too," Grace admitted. "Honestly, I've never had a weekend like this." Daniel twirled his glass, then glanced over. "Have you ever thought about what happens after the contract ends?" The question made Grace fall silent. "I'm starting to wonder," he continued. "What if Emily gets used to this? To you?" Grace turned to him, worry flickering in her eyes. She had no answer. And in that moment, both of them realized they were treading into dangerous territory, where feelings weren't pretend anymore, but terrifyingly real. A week after the Vermont trip, Grace got a call from her mother. "Your father and I would love to have you, and the whole family, over for dinner this Sunday. There's something important we want to share." "Important?" Grace asked cautiously. "Nothing bad. It's good news. We'll tell you all at dinner." Grace hesitated. The word family made her heart tighten just a little, but she agreed. On Sunday evening, Daniel wore a suit, and Emily twirled around in her prettiest dress. Grace's parents' house was large, elegant, yet warm. "She's adorable," Grace's mother said upon seeing Emily. "Looks like an angel." Throughout dinner, Emily stole the show. She told stories, made everyone laugh, and was the bright spot at the table. When dessert arrived, Grace's father stood and raised his glass. "We have an announcement. Your mother and I are officially retiring. We want to travel, slow down, and pass the company to the next generation." Grace froze. She had known it was coming, just not tonight. "The company is now officially yours," he said. "But more than that, We're proud of the family you've built." Daniel gently squeezed Grace's hand under the table. She glanced at him and smiled, then looked toward Emily. And then, as if things had gotten too perfect, Emily suddenly looked up and asked, "Grandma, how do you know Daddy and Mama Grace love each other?" Silence. Grace's mother smiled. "Because when your dad looks at Mama Grace, his eyes shine, just like when he looks at you." Daniel stopped breathing. Grace flushed red. "And when Mama Grace talks about Daddy, she smiles different," Emily added. No one laughed this time. The air changed, suddenly quiet, almost fragile. On the ride home, hardly a word was spoken. Emily fell asleep in the back seat. Daniel and Grace sat in silence. What Emily said, "It's just a kid's imagination," Daniel muttered. Grace didn't reply, but her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. After dinner at Grace's parents' house, something shifted, not loud or obvious, but enough to make both adults take a step back. Grace started accepting more business trips. Meetings she used to delegate now required her presence. She left early, came home late, after everyone had gone to bed. Daniel buried himself in freelance projects. He worked long hours, sometimes all night. He started waking up earlier. No more morning coffee with Grace, no more quiet glances across the breakfast table. They lived in the same house, but moved through it like strangers passing in a hallway they used to share. One night, as Grace tucked Emily into bed, the little girl asked, "Mama Grace, why doesn't Daddy read to me anymore?" Grace paused. "Daddy's busy with work, sweetheart." "Then why don't we eat breakfast together anymore? We used to, all of us." Grace didn't know what to say, because the truth was, she missed it too. Emily went quiet, then sighed. "I don't like it when everyone's sad. I like it when we all laugh." Grace smoothed her hair, smiled softly, but her chest ached. The next morning, Daniel ran into Grace in the kitchen by accident. Both reached for the coffee pot, then stopped when their eyes met. "Hi," Daniel said first, voice low. "Hi," Grace replied, quickly stepping back to give him space. The awkwardness wasn't from unfamiliarity. It was from how close they had become, and how hard they were now pretending none of it had happened. That night, Grace packed for a 3-day trip. She didn't hug Emily goodbye. She didn't say anything. She left a note for Daniel. "I'll be back soon. Don't forget her allergy meds." Emily asked, "Why did Mama Grace leave without saying goodbye?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He just held her tiny hand and felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of them. 2 days after Grace left for her trip, Daniel was jolted awake by violent coughing from Emily's room. He rushed in to find her shivering, burning up, her breathing rapid and shallow. She barely responded when he called her name. Her eyes were glassy, her lips dry and cracked. Panic surged through him. He wrapped her in a blanket and carried her straight to the car. On the way to the hospital, he dialed Grace's number, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped the phone. She answered after 2 rings. "Daniel?" "Emily. She's burning up, barely conscious. I'm taking her to the hospital. Please." "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's, the closest one." "I'm coming now." 2 hours later, Grace burst into the hospital hallway, still in her work clothes, creased and travel-worn. She spotted Daniel slumped in a chair, head in his hands. "Daniel," she called. He looked up. His eyes were red. "They said it's pneumonia. She needs to stay for a few days." Grace felt her knees weaken. "Can I see her?" "She's asleep, but yes." Together they walked into the hospital room. Emily lay still, tiny hand hooked to an IV, her face pale. Grace sat gently by the bed, brushing damp curls from the girl's forehead. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm sorry I wasn't here." Daniel stood behind her, watching, and for the first time, he saw it. The love she had for Emily wasn't contractual. It was real, deep, unquestionable. That night, they took turns staying awake. Under dim lights and the steady beep of heart monitors, Daniel sat beside Grace as she leaned her head back against the wall, eyes barely open. "Grace?" "Yes?" "I'm sorry for pulling away, for making things weird between us." Grace opened her eyes, met his. "I was scared," Daniel admitted softly. "Scared that if I really fell for you, it would all just be in my head." Grace's breath hitched. "And what if it's not?" Daniel didn't reply, but the way he held her hand said everything. In that silence, their fingers intertwined like they had always belonged there. 3 days later, Emily was discharged from the hospital. She looked weaker, but her eyes lit up when she saw Daniel and Grace holding hands in the hospital room. On the ride home, the car was quiet, not awkward, but peaceful. When they pulled up to the house, Emily whispered, "I missed our home." Daniel hugged her tightly. "Me too." That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Daniel and Grace sat in the backyard. The soft golden light touched their faces, creating a warmth they hadn't felt in weeks. "Thank you for coming back," Daniel whispered. "Thank you for calling," Grace replied. Daniel looked into her eyes, hesitating. "Grace, what we have, it may not have started with love, but—" She smiled. "But now it is love." He nodded. "I don't want the contract to end. I want to start over. With you, for real." Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel dropped to one knee and pulled a small ring from his pocket. Simple, but quietly beautiful. "Grace Bennett, will you marry me? Not for a contract this time, for real love?" Tears filled Grace's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes, I will." A small cough came from the doorway. Emily, in her pajamas and clutching her stuffed bear, was watching them. "I say yes, too," she said, very seriously. Daniel and Grace laughed, motioning her over. She ran into their arms and hugged them tightly. "We're a real family now, right?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, a real family." Grace whispered, "This time, forever." 6 months after the proposal, a small ceremony was held in the backyard. It wasn't a grand wedding, no glittering chandeliers or lavish decorations, but it had everything that mattered: love, family, and sincerity. Emily served as the maid of honor, wearing a cream-colored dress with a tiny flower crown in her hair. She walked down the aisle between 2 rows of chairs, holding a little basket of petals, her face glowing like sunshine. Grace, in a simple yet elegant wedding dress, couldn't take her eyes off Daniel, the man who had entered her life through a contract but stayed through love. "You look like a dream," Daniel whispered as she reached him. They exchanged vows, not to begin a performance, but to begin a real life. When the officiant asked, "Do you promise to love, cherish, and walk beside each other for life?" both answered without hesitation, "I do." After the ceremony, the 3 of them blew out candles on a small wedding cake. Emily raised her glass of juice high and announced, "Cheers to Daddy, cheers to Mommy Grace, and cheers to our family." The backyard erupted in applause and laughter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel watched the 2 of them play, his heart full. Grace came over and gently took his hand. "Thank you for believing in that crazy idea back then." Daniel smiled. "The craziest and the best decision I ever made." That night, after Emily had fallen asleep, Daniel and Grace sat on the familiar bench beneath the tree. "Do you think we've come too far from just a contract?" Grace asked. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "No, I think we've come exactly where we were meant to be." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Now we're a family. No conditions, no limits." "We've always been a family, Grace. Today just made it official." From inside the house, Emily's sleepy giggle echoed softly. They both smiled, knowing that everything was finally whole. On a sunny morning, Emily sat at the breakfast table, wearing her little reading glasses, carefully writing in her journal. Daniel brought out 2 mugs of hot coffee and placed one in front of Grace, who was finishing breakfast. He kissed her forehead gently. "Good morning, my beautiful wife." Grace blushed, just like she did the first time he called her that. From the table, Emily looked up. "Want to hear my school essay?" "Of course," Daniel said. "What did you write, sweetheart?" Emily took a deep breath, her face serious like a grown-up. "My family is a miracle. My dad is an architect, my mom is a businesswoman, and I'm the storyteller. Once my dad lost his job and met my mom. She was amazing but lonely. She asked him to marry her, right there on the street. They didn't marry because of love at first, but to help each other. Over time, they learned that what matters most isn't how something begins, but who you choose to stay with." Grace wiped away tears, and Daniel smiled proudly. Emily continued, "And that's how I got the best family ever, because some families aren't born from blood. They're built from love and choice." Daniel swallowed hard. Grace couldn't stop her tears. In that moment, they knew. She understood everything. The 3 of them hugged. Nothing more needed to be said. Love now wasn't a promise on paper. It was real, warm, and lasting, like morning light, like the laughter of a child.